us about what we're going to discuss.
The male has no season in which he is not willing to engage in the breeding act.
Could you have been sleeping in a position that stimulated you? Grinds her clothed genitals on his leg while he's fully clothed. He becomes aroused, but doesn't ejaculate.
Be honest with yourself and Jehovah about your weaknesses.
Hi everybody, welcome back. This is Dr. Jason W. Morrison, Theologist, New South Wales, Australia, continuing the subject of, oh no, what now? I am a Jehovah's Witness. Subject, marriage and sex. Let's start, shall we? We're down in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and we were around the verse 4 and 5 area, moving towards verse 8. And I don't want to come back into this section. Look at the second talk. If we go to verse 8, it says, "But I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am," which was celibate. In the context of religious devotion, not in the context of social life. If you're not the type of person that wants to remain on your own, then company is more important than religious devotion. Okay, your company and love and relationship and sharing of affection is more important than religious devotion. Paul had obviously sold himself out to Christ. Good luck to him. And that's all well and granted. It was his choice. But if you're not a full-time, sold-out person, as it were, to the Lord Jesus Christ, and you can manage being celibate without too much damage, then that's all fine. But for the normal person that needs company and everything, I don't think it's good for them to remain as he was, because this man was a very special individual minister who was confronted by the Lord Jesus Christ himself. But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry. Now, again, remember what I said? If they cannot keep their passions out of the way, if they cannot, if they want to follow their passions, as it were, then let them marry. But remember, passion isn't a strong enough reason to be married. And I'm very surprised that Paul's using this for the motivation of marriage, because a lack of self-control is not a good reason to get married. If say for instance your wife asked you, or your husband asked you, why did you marry me, and you said, oh, lack of self-control, then I don't think they'd find that complimentary. In fact, I think I would find that very offensive. So the motivation for marriage needs to be one more of caring and value rather than a lack of self-control. For it is better to marry than to burn with passion. So obviously, passion can drive you to a point where you need companionship, but is that a validation? Is that strong enough for a marriage to take place? Because many marriages fall by the wayside due to a lack of compatibility in the area of passion. And when passion's fulfilled, it's like a stomach without food. Once you eat, you don't need to eat anymore. And if passion's the motivation and that passion's fulfilled, then guess what? You're not going to want that person anymore. Okay, let's move on. Keep your marriage vows. Now, these are obviously people that have crossed over into marriage. Now, to the marriage I command. Now, this is Paul's command. He's got some gall, this guy. Yet not I, but the Lord. Oh, well, now he's saying this is the Lord. A wife is not to depart from her husband. But even if she does depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband. And a husband is not to divorce his wife. Now, we need to go to Matthew 19. And we will. And we're going to read from verse 4. The Pharisees asked the question, saying, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? Now, remember, the crux of the question is just for any reason. And this is what they were doing. They were finding any reason that they could to divorce their husbands and wives, to find somebody that was going to suit their need over and above that of the person that they were married to, and they were dissolving their marriages basically for lust. And he answered and said to them, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? He didn't make them male and male or female and female. And he said, for this reason a man should leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. So there's an exclusive separation between the parents and the children when marriage is involved. Now, that doesn't mean that the parents are excluded completely, because there's some very cruel children out there that leave their parents completely out of things. He's just saying there's a proper order in which the parents and the children navigate through to the dividing line of marriage when the umbilical cord is broken between the parents and the children through the course of marriage. And the two shall become one flesh. Not two shall become two flesh or three, the two shall become one. So then they are no longer two but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let man not separate. Now this was the key here. If God's joined someone together, what he's saying is do everything you can as a man or as a human, not to let your heart grow hard, not to let this thing be separated through sinful or deliberately harmful behaviour. Then they said to him, why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and put her away? What they're saying is now then, well, isn't it legit that you can divorce for any and every reason? But Jesus says this, he gets very specific now. He said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, and this is what's usually underlying in people separating, unresolved issues, resentments, bitternesses, a lack of sorries. Usually one of the people in the relationship's the slave and the other one's the master, as it were. I know that's a little bit extreme, but you know what I mean. And it comes down to somebody giving in to the hardness of their heart. They just don't want to tolerate it anymore. There's not enough flexibility, there's not enough understanding, there's not enough fair fighting within the relationship, as it were, to get things resolved. In fact, a lot of people don't know how to get things resolved because in this day and age, we're too scared to confront things as they really are. So he says, because of the hardness of your hearts, and remember he said, let not man separate. So he's brought it down now to the person's heart. You were permitted to divorce your wives and husbands, as it were. But from the beginning, it was not so. Now, why was it not so at the beginning? Adam and Eve weren't married. They were just united, weren't they? Let's just look at this for a minute. Adam and Eve weren't married. They were just united. But in this case, there's more of a commitment in the sense of a legal commitment called marriage. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, now that's taking away the any and every reason, right? And what it really is saying is, except for a genuine case of sexual immorality and marries another, commits adultery, because you haven't had a legitimate reason to leave. Even though the marriage is annulled, spiritually speaking, it wasn't legitimate. So it's like when he said, if you look at a woman lustfully and you sleep with her, you've basically looked at her lustfully. It's no different to sleeping with her. What he's saying is, if you're getting divorced for not the right reasons, then you're really no different to an adulterer, basically. And whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. Now, let me read this clearly. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. Okay? That's the male aspect. And whoever marries her, now this is the female, on the other hand, it's not the same woman, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. Now, it's not the woman who was divorced, it's the woman who chooses to be divorced. Because what this does otherwise is put a woman who's been illegitimately divorced in a position where she cannot move forward with a life to have a restore and restart in a new marriage. So these people have decided, on the one hand, that if sexual immorality is the intrusion in the marriage, then they legally have the right to divorce. If it's not, then they don't have that right. And it's easy to say, but there's many other reasons besides that cause divorces today, like financial stress, lack of attention, neglect, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, just wear people out. And his disciples said to him, if such is the case of the man with his wife, it is better not to marry. In some cases, and husbands have abused their wives and killed them. Wives have killed their husbands due to these frustrations. Sometimes divorce is the only way to go, even though it's not the religious preference. Verse 12. And what's he going to talk about now? I'm going freehand here now. Just bear with me. But to the rest I, not the Lord, say, if any brother has a wife who does not believe, this is going to be interesting. If any brother has a wife who does not believe, so the husband's the believer and the wife's the unbeliever, and she is willing. Now, the willingness is on the unbeliever's part, not the believer's part, to live with him. Let him not divorce her. Now, the husband hasn't got the right to divorce anybody solely on the basis that the woman doesn't believe. In fact, it's the opposite. The husband's to persevere and be patient with the person that they're married to, regardless of whether they believe or not. It's the person that is not the religious person that has to make the choice, ultimately, of whether they need to leave or not the religious person. And unfortunately, that is not always the case, because some people let their religion become more valuable than the person that they're supposed to love, and the next minute they're just causing a ruckus and they're pursuing people that they think have the same religious commitment and devotion as what they have, but they end up miserable anyway because it's out of a selfish motive. So what Paul's saying here is, just because the person that you're married to doesn't believe and you believe, that's no right for you to get divorced. And a woman who has a husband who does not believe, and this goes for women too, if he is willing to live with her, let her not divorce him. Now that's contrary to what most Christians believe and are taught. It's the unbelieving person who has the right, if they want to make the decision to annul the marriage, not the one that believes. The one that believes has to persist and sustain and maintain the marriage. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife. So it's complementary, isn't it, the belief in Christ? It's saying that because you're married, that belief rolls over onto the husband who doesn't believe. And I find that very encouraging. And the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. So the husband's belief rolls over onto the unbelieving wife. But what happens is a lot of unbelieving people can be frustrated and don't like coming second place to people's beliefs, like if they go to a Bible study and that, and they get resentful and all sorts of things can happen. And likewise, the religious person can get resentful if the unbelieving person doesn't get involved. So it becomes very complicated, and that's why it says in some part, I can't remember, might even be here, that it's not good to mix with people that don't believe. But it's a bit hard if you're already married and then you get saved, isn't it? Otherwise your children would be unclean. Now children aren't unclean. Paul's getting a little bit willy-nilly here with his getting carried away here with his religion himself, because children are just innocent, aren't they? Aren't they? So, calling children unclean and this sort of thing, I don't agree with that. I just find that Paul's gone a little bit too deep there, and I don't think that's appropriate myself. You're welcome to argue that, but I would like your comments on that. Children are innocent, really they are, and nevertheless, if they're in a family where one of the people believe, then they're sanctified. They are holy. But if the unbeliever departs, right, the person's had enough and made a choice to leave, then let them depart. Usually people don't let their marriage dissolve without a fight unless they've had enough themselves. And a brother or a sister is under bondage in such cases. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases. In other words, if the unbeliever wants to go, then it's no different to somebody committing sexual immorality, which is not what he said up here, is it? Or what Jesus said. So obviously, if you're married to an unbelieving person and they decide to leave, then there shouldn't be any religious conscience if you agree to that person leaving. Although I don't find marriages dissolve without carnage and harm and hurt. Either way. But God has called us to peace, and that is the whole crux of where the shunning rule of the Jehovah Witnesses or any other religion falls over. Most religions shun because people get very fearful if they feel the person that they're with or the people that they're mixing with do not have the same religious values as what they have. So they draw towards their religious organization or the religious group and withdraw from the people that they find aren't living up to the expectations of themselves or that group. That's basically what shunning is. But the Jehovah Witnesses take that to a whole different extreme altogether and completely separate the families of the people within that organization if it suits them to do so based on whatever their principles are. But no, believers are supposed to have forgiveness and peace. Now that doesn't mean you don't have boundaries, but it does mean you just don't cut people off because they're not suiting the religious organization that you're in. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Well, apparently, according to the shunning rule of the Jehovah Witnesses, the harder you discipline somebody and push them away, the more chance you've got of helping them to come back. That's a new one to me. I think you can disable people by being over-supportive, so there's a balance, and you can disable people by being under-supportive. But if you have proper boundaries in place, constructive boundaries that are fair and square, but still show that you care, I think it's a more constructive way of helping somebody to come to their senses than completely wiping them out altogether to the point where you won't even receive a text message. I mean, that is just a low form of discipline. Or how do you think, O husband, how do you know, O husband, whether you will save your wife? So there's a lot of hope there for the believer to have a ministry within their marriage, really. Not that you turn it into a ministry, but some possible way your partner might see that through your life you have something that they need and want to share in. So on that note, this is Dr. J.W. Morrison. I'm going to close there on this series of talks. I hope it's helped. We are to have peace and forgiveness as far as we can handle it, tolerance, and I'll talk to you in the next talk. Thank you for listening, and bye for now. Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching, and bye for now.